You know, I get asked a lot how I think certain movies are going to perform at the box office. I like to think I have a good feel for this thing, but it's an imperfect science. So today, I wanted to play a game with you guys. Let's play Flop or Not. Hey, what's up everybody? It's Nick here at the Lost River Drive-In, and today we're going to play Flop or Not. Now, Flop or Not is simple. I'm going to go down the list of upcoming movies, mainly movies that I have interest in, or movies that are taking a big risk that could either be sleeper hits or be total failures. I'm also going to give you guys a prediction on how well I think the movie is going to do. I'll give like a ballpark number for each one. The first movie in question is Maxine. Now, if you remember, Pearl crossed just over 10 million at the box office, and X did about 15 million at the box office. These are A24 horror films. They don't get huge marketing pushes, so them making that amount of money on a $1 million budget was a huge win for A24. Having said that, Maxine has a much bigger marketing machine behind it and a larger budget. That comes out this week. If I had to guess, this is not going to be a flop. Now, that's relative to the budget. If this makes $25 million, it's not a flop. It's a massive success. But I will go as far as to say this. I think that this movie's going to make more than X and Pearl combined, and I think that Maxine's probably going to end up somewhere north of $50 million worldwide. I actually hope that's being conservative, and maybe this is crazy, and a lot of people are like, dude, you're insane, there's no way. But if The Strangers Chapter 1 can do it, especially after the bad reviews, I have a feeling Maxine can do it. So no, this will not be a flop. Next up is going to be Longlegs. Now, simply for the word of mouth, people talking about how disturbing this movie is, and having Nicolas Cage and Mika Monroe in it, I think that this movie is not going to be a flop. Now, it's a low-budget indie horror film again, so it's not really expected to make a ton of money, and it doesn't need to be a success. So I don't think this movie's going to get anywhere near 50 million or something, but I could see this ending its worldwide run between 15 and 20 million. For a low budget, that is a massive success. So no, Longlegs will not be a flop. Next up is going to be Twisters, the sequel to the beloved disaster film Twister. No, this will not be a flop. But this is complicated because I recently learned that the budget for Twisters was $200 million. Now, I'm sure the VFX are going to be incredible, and I'm sure you're going to see all that money on screen. Having said that, though, $200 million, like, that's kind of a lot for this movie. This is a sequel to a movie that's like 3 decades old. I feel like it's a gamble, but I think it's a risk that's going to pay off. Look, it's a disaster movie, and people love disaster movies. It's also coming out in the peak of summer, and it's a recognizable IP. You've also got Glenn Powell leading the cast here. He's kind of becoming a star. So, if I had to guess, it's not going to be a flop. Relative to its budget, though, it's going to be cutting it close. I'm going to say that Twisters is probably going to tap out around $400 million worldwide, which will be just enough to break even, but still, the budget is far too high for this one. Next up is Deadpool and Wolverine, and I shouldn't even have to get into this one because this is absolutely positively on no planet going to be a flop. This movie's going to make over $1 billion. It's going to be a much-needed shot in the arm for the MCU as a whole, and I think it's because people have been waiting for characters that they maybe haven't seen a lot of to return and return in big ways. You can make the argument that in recent years, although we've gotten some sequels, I specifically think of Thor, Love and Thunder, people might have been played out a little bit on some of these characters. Well, it's been 6 years since the last Deadpool movie, and I don't know, Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine, easy $1 billion in the bank, absolutely a smash hit. Next up is going to be Trap, the latest M. Night Shyamalan film. Now, with Josh Hartnett leading the cast in this one, and a trailer that actually seems quite interesting, I'm going to say this won't be a flop. Having said that, this movie's not going to make $200 million worldwide, but it's a modest budget, it's recognizable names behind the camera and in front of the camera, and I think that coming out right at the end of summer is really going to do this movie wonders. I think that Shyamalan in recent years has kind of faded in popularity because some of his most recent movies have not been very good, but I think this is going to be one of them that's going to turn the tide, and we've seen that a lot with M. Night Shyamalan throughout his career. He's got great movies, so-so movies. He comes back big, so-so movies. I think this is going to be one where he comes back in a big way. Next up is Borderlands. Now, this one I specifically wanted to tackle because I have not seen a lot of chatter about it, and it's Eli Roth. This is going to be a flop. Look, Borderlands should have come out when the game was in peak popularity. I understand there was a lot behind the scenes there that prevented that from happening, but it's been too long. And judging by the trailer, although there is a good cast behind it, I just don't see the marketing machine or the interest in this at this point. So if you're a Borderlands fan, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say, but I just really think it's going to be a flop, and I think it'll be lucky to cross $100 million worldwide. Next up is Alien Romulus, and no, this movie will not be a flop. Look, there are reasons to worry about the Disney machine behind this movie. There's also reasons to be optimistic, and the main reason to be optimistic is the money, the marketing machine. Disney's going to put this movie out there for the people that really want to see this movie. They're going to know it exists. I think this movie's going to get good reviews too, and I think that positive word of mouth is going to bring some people that maybe kind of petered out after Alien Covenant back to the theater to see this one. I think this movie is going to do very well. If I had to venture to guess what it's going to do, I would say anywhere between $200 and $250 million. The budget is $40 million, so that would be a massive hit for this series, and I think would bring Alien back for years to come. Next up is The Crow. Now, when I think of The Crow, based off of the backlash we saw from the trailer and just the fact that they are remaking the film in general, I think of Morbius. And that is not a good comparative. Having said that, though, I don't think The Crow is going to be a flop. Look, the movie is probably going to do what Morbius did. Anywhere from, I'd say, $140 to $180 million worldwide. And for its budget, that will make its money back and then some. Having said that, if they were hoping this was going to be a $400 or $500 million movie that was really going to bring about a new era for the Crow franchise and Bill Skarsgård was going to don the makeup for the next 15 years, I don't see that happening at all. Having said that, though, relative to its modest budget, I do think The Crow is going to be successful enough, but it's not going to be a smash hit. Next up is Beetlejuice. And this one is interesting because I actually saw some box office predictions earlier this week where a lot of people were actually predicting this one to underperform. I just don't see it. Look, you've got Winona Ryder and you've got Michael Keaton back in iconic roles for them. You've also got Catherine O'Hara back in an iconic role for her. And not to mention you're bringing in new blood, somebody that is at the top of her game in Jenna Ortega. The cast alone and the name brand recognition that is Beetlejuice, I just don't see any world where this movie is not a very successful movie. If I had to guess on the box office total of Beetlejuice, I would probably say $200 to $250 million. But that is more than enough to consider the movie a hit. Next up is Speak No Evil from Blumhouse and starring James McAvoy. I don't know how to feel about this one, to be honest with you guys. Blumhouse keeps their budgets relatively low, so I think because of that, this movie will be successful enough. It's going to turn a profit. However, I do not think this movie is going to take the world by storm. I don't see this movie doing incredibly well at all. But that is the thing about running a production company like Jason Blum does. If you don't put a ton of money into your movies, they are very low risk, very high reward productions. And you got to give the guy credit for that. So I think that this is going to turn a profit and do decently well, but I don't think it's going to do all that well. So not a flop, but not a hit either. Next up is going to be Joker Folie à Deux. Now, this is absolutely not going to be a flop. The first Joker movie made over $1 billion. It was a massive success. It was no secret to anybody. Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix did not want to do a sequel. They felt that movie was a self-contained story. It didn't need to be connected to any universe. That was it. One and done. But because it made so much money, and DC and Warner Brothers have really been wanting to milk some money out of these DC properties, they were like, hey, do another one, please, please. Having said that, Todd Phillips said he wouldn't do it unless he came up with a great idea. The fact that he came back, and so did Joaquin Phoenix, marking the first time he's ever made a sequel, I think we're in good hands here. You also add in Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn, and by watching the trailer, it seems a lot like the first movie in tone, style, and substance. So this movie is going to be a massive hit. If I had to guess, I'm going to say this is going to do right around $1 billion as well. Maybe a little bit less than Joker, might be 900 mil, but I'm going to say 900 to $1 billion. This is going to be a smash hit. Next up is Tera Fire 3, and this will absolutely not be a flop. One thing Damien Leone is doing that is very smart with Tera Fire 3, even after the pretty big success that was Tera Fire 2, is keeping the budget down. Having said that, he's brought in some more recognizable names to the cast this time around, and I think that that little bit of extra money that he didn't have to play with last time is really going to benefit this movie. I think coming out at the peak of Halloween season is also going to help this movie. Tera Fire 3 is going to be a big hit for Bloody Disgusting and for Damian Leone. If I had to guess, I'm going to say between $40 and $50 million worldwide. Next up is going to be Smile 2, and there's no universe where this movie is going to flop. The first movie took the world by storm, specifically social media, and it made over $200 million. Paramount made the right decision by quickly following it up with a sequel and striking while the iron is hot. I think Smile 2 is going to do between $150 million and $200 million worldwide, and it's going to be another massive success for Paramount. Next up is Venom: The Last Dance, and just like the first two movies, this is not going to be a flop. I actually predict this movie will get closer to $1 billion than the first movie did. I think this could be the biggest Venom film. And I think because it is the last one, or at least they're billing it as such, which I think is a mistake, because Sony has one property in their SSSU, whatever they call it, that is actually doing well, and that's Venom. And they're going to just tap out after 3 movies and just stick with, Craven and Morbius and Madam Web. What could go wrong? But I think Venom: The Last Dance is going to be a really big hit. And I'm seeing this doing between $800 million and $1 billion worldwide when it's all said and done. Next up is Gladiator II. Now, yes, this is a sequel to a movie that's years old, but it's also a sequel to a movie that is beloved. And I think with Ridley Scott behind the camera, I just think that lends credibility to this film. Look, Gladiator II is coming out at a perfect time around the holiday season. You're bringing a lot of the original players back and bringing in fresh faces that are only continuing to pique people's interests. I just don't see any way Gladiator II will not be a massive hit. Next up is Craven the Hunter. And I'll tell you guys, I really don't know where to go with this one. This is really going to be dependent on the early reactions of the film. That's it. Because that's how this entire Sony Spider-Man universe has been. If the early reactions are negative, the movie has no legs. If they're positive, it legs out to quite impressive feats, like the Venom films, but those being the only ones. Now, Craven the Hunter also is up against it because the most recent Sony Spider-Man Universe movie did not do well at all. And the production budget is between $100 and $130 million. So really, comfortably, you need to make about $300 million for this to truly be seen as successful. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it's because of the poor movies earlier in this universe that people just aren't going to turn out for it. Venom is the exception because Venom has proven itself with 2 films now. People know what they're getting with those Venom movies and they tend to like them. But every other offering that Sony has given us in this universe has just not been good. So although I think Craven the Hunter is probably going to be the best movie in this universe aside from the Venom films, and I probably will actually enjoy it based off of what I've seen so far, I think it's going to be a flop. And last but certainly not least is Nosferatu. Now, I have struggled with this one a lot, simply because I don't like the release date. I don't know how to feel about a Robert Eggers movie having wide appeal to casual audiences. The guy is a very unique director. He has a very unique style. You know an Eggers film when you see it. And Nosferatu by the trailers looks like an Eggers film. Having said that, though, I think the inclusion of some big name actors, I think releasing it in December actually could help it because of the holidays, people being off work and out of school and being able to go to the theaters. I think this is going to do well. Now, relative to its budget, we'll have to see. But overall, I think it's going to be a pretty successful film for everybody involved. But I honestly can't give a prediction on this one. I just truly can't. I really don't know where I see this one ending up, monetarily speaking. I'd love to see it cross $100 million. I think it actually could do that if it gets positive word of mouth. But we'll just have to wait and see. So the common theme you guys heard here was, I think I only mentioned like 3 movies that were going to be perceived flops or just not very big hits. Maybe there was 4. I can't really remember. There was a lot of movies that I said are not going to be flops. Why is that? Well, because I've been banging the drum for weeks now, saying that the box office is fine. Movie theaters are fine. I've been taking screenshots. I've been keeping receipts when people will write editorials about how this movie's going to tank or the theaters are in this bad of shape. I'm keeping receipts because I truly think a lot of these people are going to look idiotic by year's end. Now, there are some big movies coming out that I didn't even mention because 1, I have little to no interest, and 2, I don't even think their viability commercially is up for debate. Like The Lion King, that's going to do bonkers numbers. Also, look at Sonic the Hedgehog 3, yeah, that's going to do very well. So I just think that by the time we get to the end of the year, you're going to see a lot of movies that did really, really well. And when we look back on 2024 as a whole, the story of 2024 isn't going to be that the box office was down and theaters are in danger. No. The story is going to be, man, the first 5 months of that year really sucked. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The main one being the strikes. This had been foretold to us last year. Once they finally reached an agreement, it had been warned to us, hey guys, by the way, because there were months and months of us not making anything, there's going to be a period next year where nothing comes out. It's going to be very bare bones. And we saw that for the first few months of this year. There were some movies that had been in the can already that were just waiting to be released that we got, and they weren't even big hits. All of the heavy hitters are coming in the second half of this year. And again, I think that you're really going to see a resurgence at the box office, and I cannot wait for that to be the case. But I want to hear what you guys think down below. Of these movies I mentioned, which ones are going to be a flop, which ones are not, and which ones do you think could surprise people one way or the other? Comment down below, let me know. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In. I thank you so much for stopping in, but I'm pulling out.